Guess what? That's right, me, another shrimp on the barbie. I am Satoshi Nakamoto.
You know, you've officially gotten on the top of my list of most intriguing people I've met in a long time. You've really striven to kind of have some redemption based on the fact that you've turned around your life and that you're working for good now.
I try to say the things that no one else will say. You know,
I've noticed that about you. The best leaders are, we're taking that hill. How did they get so successful being such a jerk to people?
I see today's society as a society of individuals who largely only think of themselves and not their fellow human beings.
Some of the things going on in our culture right now were even more so in Rome. But when a country is so self-focused and allows every single vice or every single belief to have equal platform prominence, we just look to Rome to see what happens.
I'm Brett Johnson, former United States Most Wanted Cybercriminal, now good guy and host of The Brett Johnson Show. Today's episode, we're talking to Tom Harper about Christian leadership and some problems that Bretty's got regarding faith. Now, before we get to that point, we're going to talk about some news from the headlines. From the headlines today, we're talking about Craig Wright. Now, who in the hell is Craig Wright? Let's talk about cryptocurrency for a second. Today's crypto, Bitcoin's going off at about $61,000 today. Bitcoin is not the genesis of crypto as we know it today. There's actually a couple of other tokens. We have to go back to when I was committing crime in the early 2000s. We had this thing called e-gold. E-gold was basically cryptocurrency minus the blockchain, used by criminals worldwide to pay for any number of criminal goods and services. A very successful platform of payments. It got shut down. Turns out it was used for laundering money by criminals like me. It got shut down. The guy got sentenced to several years in prison. After that, another crypto token, another precursor of crypto popped up called Liberty Reserve. Liberty Reserve, that person that started that, I think he's still on the most wanted list today. Those are the precursors of today's cryptocurrency. There was a gentleman by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto that comes up with a white paper of this thing called Bitcoin. And that is the genesis of all cryptocurrency that we have today. What makes Bitcoin so successful is the distributed ledger. So think of it as every transaction is on a ledger, and that ledger is distributed throughout an entire network. If you have Bitcoin, you can download the ledger and have part of that yourself. So that ledger really matters as far as the legitimacy of that token. Everything is tracked all the way through, and it's immutable, okay? That's the technology. That's the main important thing on Bitcoin, and that's what separated Bitcoin from e-gold and Liberty Reserve. Now, no one knows who Satoshi Nakamoto is. No one knows that. The guy disappears. A gentleman, an Australian, by the name of Craig Wright, comes out a few years ago. Guess what? That's right, me, another shrimp on the barbie. I am Satoshi Nakamoto. He starts proclaiming this stuff, and he has some backing from some very influential people. Anyone who comes out publicly and says, no, your ass is not Satoshi Nakamoto, he sues them into the dirt. And that's been his modus operandi for the last few years. Now, what's interesting is that he has no proof whatsoever that he is Satoshi Nakamoto. The real Satoshi has access, or should have access, to several $1 billion in Bitcoin, which has not been moved in several years. The real Satoshi should have access to accounts that Craig Wright does not have access to. So lo and behold, over the past couple of months, there's been a group called COPA, which has taken Craig Wright to court to really determine and say, hey, you are not the real Satoshi Nakamoto. What we found out recently through this court case is that Craig Wright has forged documents. He's forged white papers. He's changed things. He has no access to the wallet keys whatsoever. And at the end of the day, no, his ass is not Satoshi Nakamoto. And that we're looking right now for the final disposition of that case, which should be coming up very soon. This is part of the problem with crypto overall. You've got a lot of charlatans, snake oil salesmen. You've got a lot of people that come out talking and proclaiming that tokens are the next big thing, and they rip a lot of people off. Craig Wright is no different in that. He's just a high dollar one at the end of the day. My advice, be careful out there. Do your research. Don't just sign on to Reddit. Don't just sign on to Discord or Telegram and take anyone's word for anything. Do your own research. Don't invest. Don't believe anything until you're able to verify it. All right, on today's Art of Accountability segment, I want to talk about gratitude for a second. We'll talk about it from my point of view. There's a lot of times when, I may have some anxiety, some stress. I do suffer from depression almost all the time. I tend to forget the blessings in my life, the things that I should be grateful for, the people who look out for me every single day. I've got a little PTSD puppy. She's about to turn 4 years old. This idea of stopping to think and consider the blessings that we have in our lives, the things that we have in our lives that we should be grateful for. I say that because a lot of the times, our lives, my life, it's so fast. We're always concentrating on things that we need to do, things that we have done. We've got these goals in mind, these things we want to accomplish, and we tend to forget the things that are important to us. Like I've got a loving family that I am very blessed and thankful to have. I've got peers in the industry that look out for me and that seek my assistance or just want to talk sometimes. And I'm very grateful for that. Considering where I came from to where I am today, I mean, consider that for a second. I was a guy that, by all rights, I should be in prison for 20 years. And I was given the opportunity to turn my life around. And I took that. And I'm very grateful for that. And I think that's something that we as a people need to pause and consider more of the things that we've got in our lives that we're grateful for and we're thankful for. And I think if we can do that, we become a better people overall. Not really an in-depth Art of Accountability segment today, but just kind of an insight on my part. All right, on today's show, we're talking to Tom Harper. He is the executive chairman of Networld Media. Now, we're not talking about Tom for that reason. I met Tom in Las Vegas a few weeks ago. I was giving a presentation for ATMIA, and Tom walked up to me, and we started talking about other things than just cybersecurity. And Tom mentioned that he was an author, that he had written several Christian books on Christian leadership. And I thought that was a fascinating topic to discuss. And more importantly for me, Tom had mentioned faith and finding God. And people who have listened to me talk before, I have fundamental problems with that. Not because I don't want to, but I just have problems with faith. And I wanted to talk to Tom today about some of those issues, about Christian leadership, and just have that conversation. And here's the thing. You guys know by now that the Brett Johnson Show, it's morphed into this show of becoming a better person at the end of the day. And I think by talking to people like Tom, getting that insight, that it not only helps me, but hopefully it helps some other people out there as well. So, Tom Harper, thank you so much for coming on the Brett Johnson Show.
Thanks for having me, Brett. It was really cool meeting you. And, you've officially gotten on the top of my list of most intriguing people I've met in a long time. So
I appreciate that. I really do. I don't know really where to start. I have people. You're not the first. I have people ever since I started to speak. It's not uncommon for someone to come up to me and ask about my faith after a presentation, and I think it's understandable that whole arc of coming out of that out of the darkness of crime and in the process of turning my life around now, and the truth is, man, is I wish I had that belief system in place. I really do. And even Brian mentioned it before you came on, that a lot of it, I think, and a lot of it has to do with, that upbringing that I had and that parent that I had who constantly used religion as a tool of manipulation. And, dude, I don't know what to do about that. And I don't know if you've got the answer, but I thought I'd talk to you about it.
I actually went and listened to or watched your Jordan Peterson interview to get, fuller picture. And I feel like I know a lot of like the past, in your life, and maybe in a lot of the things that have affected faith for anybody in your situation. And I think that it might be good for me to tell a little bit of my own story,
yes,
growing up, and just start there. I'll be brief, but basically I grew up searching spiritually. I was involved in a lot of psychic and evil and occult kinds of spiritual pursuits. When I got older, I got more serious about that. And at the same time, I was trying to find God. I was trying to find faith in what was true. And so I went to college, and I threw myself into hedonism and the frat life, and with all the parties and the drinking, right, and everything. And that was empty. So I kept searching. I actually made fun of Christians in college, and I look back on that with regret, but it was also part of my own spiritual journey. And after college, I dove into the occult even deeper. I got involved with some people locally who did seances and psychic readings and all these kinds of things. I'm like, okay, I'm getting closer now.
What was the draw? What was the attraction for that?
Well, you know what? What's funny? It's very similar to what you explained to Jordan about power and ego. So I wanted an advantage over people. I wanted to have power over them. I wanted to have spirits, evil spirits on my side, and allies in the world here. And I wanted to get rich, and I wanted to have all the good things, and I thought that would be an edge. And so, inside us, we have this human innate desire for something more than this earthly life. And I was always aware of that as a kid, and it just kept growing as an adult. And so I just finally got tired of the search, and somebody gave me a book, and it was a book by Josh McDowell. It was called A Ready Defense, and it was a defense of the Christian faith, basically. But what was really cool and what got me was that this guy, Josh McDowell, had written this book based on his own experience. In law school, he tried to set out to disprove the existence of God. Okay. And through legal skills and work, he did the opposite. He couldn't deny the existence of God. Another guy named Lee Strobel did the same thing and has written some.
I've read a few of the Strobel books.
Okay. But this was a predecessor, basically, of Strobel. And so I'm sitting there reading this introduction to this book, and the book is this thick. It's 3 books in one. And so I love to read, obviously. And I was reading the introduction, which was his personal story about his own discovery of faith and of truth. And the weirdest thing happened. I thought, okay, that's good enough for me right now. And I believed. And part of it was that I realized I had this book of answers to all of my questions. What about evolution? What about, all these questions? What about history and geology and biology and cellular microbiology and origin stories and all these things, and other religions, and it was all answered in this book. But I had to first have the faith in order to fully appreciate and apprehend those truths that I was learning to defend the faith. And it's based on this word called apologetics, which you're familiar with, having read Lee Strobel's books.
Right.
And it's really defense of the faith. When you make an apologetic for something, you're not making an apology. You're actually giving reasons why you believe. If you're accused of, believing a falsehood, you give an apologetic for what you believe. And so apologetics is this area of study in Christianity of how to defend the faith. And so I had all kinds of questions and ways I was poking holes in it, and I started to find answers. I wasn't 100% satisfied, but I was satisfied enough to take that leap of faith.
Right. And
that's what faith is. It's not having all of the answers, but it's having something decided in your heart that he's real, that God is who he says he is. And I came to that point, and then I started diving into more and more of the apologetics. So it's not as much a changing of the mind to believe. It's not even just a change of the heart. For me, it was a connection of the two. I had questions that had to be answered.
Right.
And I wanted to believe in this God that I'd grown up learning about. But I didn't have the full connection between my head and my heart until that moment.
Right.
And once that clicked for me, then I was off to the races. And I started writing different books. I actually started becoming a different person. It was really wild. In fact, there's a verse I got for you, 2 Corinthians 5:17. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old has gone, the new is here. So in other words, if we believe that he is who he says he is, the Son of God, my Lord, my Savior, then it's not just a belief that's changed, but he starts changing me from the inside out.
Right.
And now I start to really, do better in life, with your new theme you're talking about with your show here.
Right.
So that's how really we can be better and do better, is to begin with faith, because the Bible is a little depressing in one area where it talks about the fact that when we try to become a better person, it's like here's the standard, and we start here.
Right.
And Mother Teresa got here.
Right.
And there's this gap that we can't cross on our own. The only thing that can get us across that gap is believing that Jesus came to die for our sins and be the perfect sacrifice, so that when we believe in him, we're kind of in him, and he takes us the rest of the way because God sees our righteousness. So that's the gospel. You might have heard, the Christian gospel bandied about from time to time, but that's the basics of it. And when I started learning that, it just took me in an exciting new direction. My brain was just firing on all synapses, and so that's a little bit of my personal story.
No. How old were you when this happened?
I think I was about 25, 26.
You were telling me this, and what I started to think about was my sister. I did some recordings with her on a podcast a few years ago, and we were talking about our childhood. And Denise, she says that she always thought that someone was going to come and save us. And I immediately responded. I was like, I knew no one ever would. And the reason I was thinking about that while you were talking was that leap of faith. And I'm now thinking that a lot of my problems with taking that leap of faith is that whole mindset that I've got of no one is going to come and save us.
Yeah.
You know, and Denise, I mean, Denise has anger issues, but Denise is absolutely a believer. She is. You know, now that you've said this, I really am sitting here thinking that, you know, that's a lot of the problem right there, is that whole mindset of, you know, do it yourself, Brett. You know, no one's coming.
A couple other verses that help explain our condition as humans that we all share. And they're from the book of Romans. And the first one is, it just says that we've all sinned and we've fallen short of the glory of God. So in other words, it doesn't matter who you are, you have sinned against God in some way. So it's not like your past, all the things you did make you a worse person in his eyes,
right?
You know, and someone who's maybe not committed any crimes or even lied, you know, they've done other things that have been sins. They've lusted, they've been greedy, or they've done different, you know, any of the 10 commandments, choose any of them. So there's not anyone righteous. There's not one of us. And so the way to think that I thought about salvation is it saves me from this wretched state of being not good enough for God. You know, because you've always striven, really since you started working for the Secret Service and turning things around, you know, you've really striven to kind of have some redemption based on the fact that you've turned around your life and that you're working for good now.
Right.
But one of the truths that is hard to hear is that even the best works that people do, again, back to Mother Teresa, her good works, the Bible says, are like filthy rags to him. In other words, it's a kind way of saying menstrual clothing back then. Okay. Right. So if you get that picture in your mind, it's, you know, obviously a little graphic, right, but that is what our good works look like to God. Because we say they're good things that we're doing, but they're so far below that gap that I was trying to explain that they're as if we've murdered and done the worst, you know, possible. There's just we can't do enough to get us all the way up to him. And so Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So that's the whole dynamics of the sacrifice and why we need him. Because no matter how much we do, we can't do enough to get us to God.
Right.
Every other religion in the world besides Christianity, it's really interesting, focuses on the works that we do, the things that we do to become holy, to get to nirvana, to get to God, to get to heaven. You know, that we have to do go to Mecca, or we have to do these kinds of prayers, or we have to give, or we have to serve, we have to do all these things. But all of that, those are filthy rags. And that's why Christianity is unique. It's the only one in which our central figurehead of the religion died and came back to life and predicted that he would do it.
Right.
You know, so I don't want to get too theological.
No.
You know, but
I wanted to start with that because I'm the guy that I'm always looking for a way to bridge that gap that I've got. You know, that taking that leap of faith, and just talking to you, like I said, that came into my mind that is probably a lot of the problem on my part. I don't know what to do about that. Maybe just realizing it will help me process through that and go from there. That's the hope anyway. One of the things that really intrigued me was you wrote a book on leadership using principles from the Bible. And I'm not well read. I've read through several different books, and I've read the Bible several times. And when you said that, I'm thinking about figures like Jesus, but I'm thinking about figures like Saul, for example, and the letters that he wrote, and the life that he led. And when you were talking about those leadership principles, I'm like, I can't think of a better book that one could use to gain leadership ideas from than the Bible.
Yeah.
Because those figures in there, they led regardless of what else was going on, they led.
They did. I was looking to learn more about servant leadership and how Jesus led, but really how others led in the Bible. Like you're saying, there's many other leaders. So I did what you've done. I read the whole Bible, and I put on certain lenses that were, just leadership. I'm just looking for leadership verses. Okay. And so I ended up coming up with about, 300 verses. And I, over a 3-year period, started tweeting those out. And as I was coming across them, I was putting in the however many characters it was. What was it, like 144 or something at the time? And I would put an abbreviated version of the verse. I'd put where it was in the Bible, and I'd put a thought, and then the hashtag biblical leadership. And so it was, I called it a micro leadership devotion, And so what I did is I spent about like 2 or 3 years doing that. And I realized at the end of the 300 or so tweets that I had lots of truth and I wanted to do something with it. I'm like, okay, so I started organizing into themes, topics, buckets. And, I've written other books. So I'm like, this has something to it. And so I kept going and ended up with the book and realized that there are leaders throughout the entire Bible that exhibit these leadership truths, and they mess up all the time. Every one of them except one sinned and did it pretty spectacularly, like, slept with someone else's wife or murdered somebody or disobeyed God to his face or lied to his face. I mean,
those are pretty big ones.
Those are pretty big. And those guys are in the Bible as models.
We don't see a lot of leaders. We do see some leaders out there sleeping with other people's wives.
Yeah.
We don't see a lot of them going and murdering people.
Yeah.
And this other stuff.
You want to read that riveting book, read the Bible itself and read all that. So, but what I did is I took those stories and I lifted the verses and went to all these topics and I came up with all of these topics. And, so here's an example of one of the tweets. So I put it in the book in written form. I don't know how well it works but the example here, do everything without arguing and complaining so that no one can criticize you. So I put this in the section on criticism and opposition as a leader. You're going to get opposed, you're going to have critics. And so the concept is, as you lead, don't do things in such a way where you argue with people all the time or you complain about things, because when you do those things, that's when people criticize you, So I'm like, that's a simple little concept, but it's like got some depth to it, and there's just so many more of these that I just sometimes myself have to go back to my own book to remember.
Right.
But, there's just so much wisdom, and it's bullet pointed wisdom that I put in here on how to lead according to the Bible. And one of the ways that I put it, and I think I might have mentioned this to you when I met you, Brett, was that even if you don't believe in Christ as your Lord and Savior, if you don't believe all that stuff, but you look at the Bible and even just the book of Proverbs within the Bible as a source of ancient wisdom.
Right.
It just works. You apply that to your leadership and it just works. So, again, you don't have to visit the theological side or believe everything that I believe to get value, big value out of the truths in the Bible and for leadership, especially in the book of Proverbs, because it's these bullet point truisms, very pithy and very, very true. And so it's just fascinating how a lot of those verses have played themselves out. I've seen them play out in my life. I've been in some really, really tough situations, lawsuits coming at me, accusations, really heavy conflicts with partners, with employees, and lots of hard stuff. And I used to keep a Bible open behind me in my credenza, open to Proverbs. Okay. And sometimes I would just spin my chair around and read a couple of them. And I'm like, yes, thank you, Right. And it just helped out. So, yeah, so that's it. It is a different way of looking at leadership because what I learned, I would say, if you ask me what's the biggest thing I learned from reading the Bible all the way through the lens of leadership, it was that you can be a servant leader and be a strong leader.
Now, what do you mean by servant leader?
So in the Bible, I think it's in Matthew 28, 23:11, where Jesus says, "The greatest among you will be your servant," and he proceeds to wash their feet to show as an example. And later on in the book of Acts, these disciples were before a leader that could put them in jail, put them in prison, and said, "You guys need to stop preaching about this Jesus, or you're going to get whipped, flogged, and then you're going to prison." Mm-hmm. And in Acts 4:29, they say, "Now, Lord," so they prayed up to God in front of this leader. "Now, Lord, consider their threats and enable your servants to speak your word with great boldness." So you see how servant and boldness are juxtaposed.
Right.
If I were just bold and confident in my own power, my own self, I would have said, "Hey, you don't know what you're talking about. Let me tell you something." But instead, I'm relying on God to guide me because I'm his servant. Lord, give me boldness. Give me the words to lead boldly, to speak boldly.
It's being able to be bold, but also being humble and minus the ego that most humans have at the same time. That's powerful.
Yes.
I mean, that really is.
That's the essence of it.
You were talking about, I think you're absolutely right. You don't have to believe the Bible in order to get these leadership lessons out of that. I've read all the books. I've read the Hagakure, which I'm a big follower of. That's the Japanese samurai code. I've read 48 Laws of Power, the Prince. I've read all of the books like that. And, I look at, when you mentioned that, the leadership principles in the Bible, and I keep going back to Paul. That's who I keep going back to. And those letters and how the man, he was humble, but he was bold, he was truthful,
totally,
and he did not care who he insulted. He just put it out there. And that type of, I'm the guy these days, I try, and sometimes I'm even successful at it. I try to say the things that no one else will say.
I've noticed that about you.
and like I said, sometimes I'm even successful at that. And it's I have a lot of trouble with humility. I really do. And I try to check myself on that frequently. But, what you're saying about that idea of being bold minus the ego really seems like something to strive toward right there.
Yeah, it is for me. I find my ego creeping in. If I do something and I get, lauded for it somehow and people appreciate what I do, it puffs me up.
Right.
And I have to just constantly, almost really daily, remember how sinful I still am. Even though I've got Christ, I believe in him, and I believe that my sins are forgiven. The Bible teaches that we still sin. Paul himself said, "I am the chief of sinners."
Right.
Like in one of those letters. In another one, he said, "Why do I do the things I don't want to do? Like, I know what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm not doing those things.
Right.
I know what I should stop doing, and I'm still doing those things, even as an apostle."
Right.
So part of the humility aspect is remembering that I'm still a sinner. You're still a sinner. And I'm reminded of a lot, but there's a verse that I picked for you. When you told your story of Carol Combs
right,
your English teacher, how it was really revealing. I love how you just don't care and you just tell stories and you reveal things about your past. It's really cool. It's one of the things that drew me to you. But when she just, for some reason, started, loving you for who you were, what she saw in you, and didn't care about anything else. She was really important in your life as someone that you could always look back on to say, there's someone that loved me unconditionally and helped me see there was hope and there was more to life than what I had experienced. And so there's a verse, and if anybody's listening to this, it's Romans 5:8. It says, but God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. It's the same exact thought behind Carol, Mrs. Combs, loving you while you were still a sinner.
right.
While we are all still sinners, Christ has died for us before he fixed us. Once we repent of our sins and we believe in him, then he starts changing us. Then he starts working on us. Then he starts helping us become better people, And so most of the time we get it backwards. Like my dad, he to the day he died at only 60 from cancer. And all the way up to the end, he was trying to say that I need to get my life in order first, and then I'll believe. Like I need to become better, and then I'll believe. And I couldn't help him understand that it was the reverse. We believe, and then he makes us better.
Right.
When he lives inside us.
I mean, I do that same thing. I do.
It's natural.
Right.
It's natural. And that's what most people think. That's the way most people believe. And so that's why faith is first, and then works follows. James, the book of James, I don't know if you remember this when you read through the New Testament, but it says, works without faith are dead.
Right.
So basically faith is what comes out of work. So like if you're doing good works, that needs to come from your faith because you believe and you're being changed and you've been humbled and you've got a new heart and you're becoming a new person. You're more compassionate now. So you're going to do more things for other people, And so that's why when I met you, I was like, has God already been working on you?
I think probably every day, but I'm the hard-headed guy.
Well, you've got a soft heart though. So that was this contrast. There is compassion. There was some wisdom getting mixed in, and it just that's why you made my most intriguing list.
Thank you.
Of the year.
Of the year. I want to talk about the leadership, but I honestly don't know how to get that faith. I don't know how to do that. And
here's what, there's one verse. So here, maybe you can write down Romans 10:9. You can look this up later. I'll read it to you right now, or put it so they can put it in the show notes. But here's how to do it. It basically, this is Paul writing. He says, if you declare with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. God tried to make it really simple for us to express faith and have faith.
Right.
And so there's two things in that verse. We say that we believe, and that we believe in our heart. Like we realize, yeah, I think I do believe now. Well, when I obeyed this and said that I was a believer, I literally was like, I think I believe, There wasn't this lightning strike.
Sure.
It wasn't like, suddenly God's voice with this spotlight came down on me and this bird landed on my shoulder. No, it was that, hey, I think I actually do believe. Lord, help me believe more fully because I don't know how to do this, but I think I do.
Right.
And that's when he answered that prayer and just took me forward. So it's not this lightning bolt. It is just this moment where, like, enough of my questions have been answered. My heart has been pricked with, by God himself to draw me toward him in his compassion for me.
Right.
And maybe that's where you are. Maybe that's where Denise, your sister, has gotten to. Others, that's how it happened for me, So
I'll keep working on it and hoping. What's the big takeaways for the Bible for any leader of a company or of a family, for leaders overall? What are the big takeaways from the Bible?
The concept of servant leadership is not a new one. It's been around for a long time. It's, Lead Like Jesus, great book. I read a long time ago, talks about the basics of how to lead like Jesus led. And there's lots of principles there. But a servant leader is the best kind of leader. But if you think about servant leadership from a worldly, non-biblical perspective, you're going to call it weak. Like, the best leaders are, we're taking that hill. Let's go. We're going to win.
Right.
Coaches, SWAT sergeants, captains that are, let's go. We're storming right now. We're going in. Or, and those leaders are great in that moment. But it's like there's a bigger picture of leadership that anyone can put into play. So that SWAT leader, let's take him as an example. In that moment of breaching, you bet your bip he's going to get strong in your face and let's go. But what about the other 95% of the time that he's your leader? How does he lead you? Is he kind? Is he compassionate? Does he know you personally? Does he know your family? Does he become an advisor? Does he have patience with you? Is he long-suffering? Does he not immediately knee-jerk reaction to say, get your butt in gear and just do it? Does he take time to really learn about you and your situation? That's the big picture of leadership. There are times in my company as CEO and chairman, when I have hit the table in frustration,
right?
And I look back on those moments and I'm like, that was really good. And here's why I say that, because I was not characterized as a table hitting, yelling, tough guy. But when I did do it, people were like, oh, he must be really passionate about this. And they listened, they sat up straight. If I said, I'm really serious about this, guys, and we're just going in the wrong direction. And I think we just need to get our act in gear. What do you think? No, that is weak leadership. It's not servant leadership. I'm not serving them by being weak. Right. I'm not serving the owners of the company by being weak. I'm not serving our customers, the readers of our websites, by being weak. I need to be strong in order to serve all those constituencies well. And if they know that there's somebody strong in leadership that's also kind and compassionate, then they're going to more readily follow or hold, give credibility to that kind of a leader versus someone who's always strong and always in your face, or always gentle to the point of passive aggression or just passivity.
Those moments of strength juxtaposed against the moments of humility, of acceptance. And I got to tell you, man, I'm in Birmingham, Alabama. And as you're talking about this, I'm not even a football fan. I'm not. My wife, when I met her, she told me, she's like, you have to choose between one of the two teams. You have to choose Auburn or you have to choose Alabama. And it took me 3 or 4 years for me to tell her at that point in time that I didn't even know that Auburn was in Alabama when you said that. But as you're talking about that, I get this picture of Nick Saban in my mind. a guy who's strong on the field, but at the same time, he knows every single player. He takes the time to nurture them, to know who they are, to know what their goals, their ideas, and he said that frequently before he retired, of making them making sure that the Alabama program made them better men at the end of the day.
Great example. Great example. It's exactly it. There are a lot of coaches, Lou Holt, there's other legendary coaches that are like that, even that are still coaches right now, that lead that way. And it's powerful because you can bet that Nick Saban will, in the locker room, get in their face at halftime if they're down.
Absolutely.
Right? He will tell them what they need to hear in order to improve their performance. Sometimes that is a kick in the rear. But when they get that kick in the rear, it's like getting kicked from a loving father who loves you, but you're also slightly afraid of because he might kick you in the rear sometimes. That's actually the relationship that we are to have with God. You may have heard of fear of the Lord, as the beginning of wisdom. So when I fear the Lord, it doesn't mean like I cower in fear all the time and say, oh, Lord, please don't strike me down for saying that. It is a healthy respect, and it's a respect for the power that he has over me and in God's case, over all existence. Mm-hmm. But in the coach's case, over me and my career, my embarrassment in front of my players. I'm afraid that he might call me out in front of these guys. So there's a healthy fear that they have of him. And when he comes in and he gives them, that kick or that slap on the back of the head that they need, they're like, I deserve that. I needed that. And then after the game, he'll come and say, hey, put his arm around him. Hey, I love you, don't you? Yeah. And I had to do that, don't you? Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to make sure. And that's it. And that's a very healthy leader-follower relationship. And that follower, that quarterback, that, whatever position, knows that the coach loves him. And that guy, that player now becomes a leader too.
Right.
As a result, because he was led well.
Do you think that that's, I look at corporate America, and should I say any CEOs' names? Let's just say that there are many CEOs. All right, let's take someone like Elon Musk, for example. Elon Musk has a huge ego.
Yeah.
Now, he's the richest man on the planet, but he has a huge ego. And I can't, I look at someone like that, and egos are big in corporate America. I've had the opportunity and been given the opportunity to talk to a lot of different companies, and a lot of the times you encounter a lot of different egos. And it occurs to me that what you're talking about today and the book that you've written, that maybe the major aspect that a lot of these CEOs in corporate America is missing is checking your ego at the door. And that if you don't have that sense of humility and humbleness, that maybe you need to work on that.
I think of Steve Jobs as another example.
Right.
There's so many that had really big egos, but that were really successful. Even guys like, Donald Trump or, any high level, high profile leader that has an ego, a healthy one, maybe even beyond health. They're like, how did they get so successful being such a jerk to people?
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that in Proverbs, what you learn is that it even says that the proud basically are successful, and I don't know why. It gives us a perspective that success is more than earning a lot of money or getting the spotlight on you in the world.
Right.
Because you're going to die someday.
Right.
And you're going to face God, the God of the universe that created you, and that really gave you the ability to go make all that money. and you've taken all the credit. So how do you think he's going to react to you? And so the Bible has expanded my perspective above my earthly corporate successes to look at eternity, and keeping that in mind. So someday when I'm in front of him, I'm going to die. I'm going to die someday. I know you just lost your father a few months ago. I just, as you know, lost my wife recently.
Yes, sir.
Our mortality is a given. I don't care what kind of drug we take or what kind of technology comes into existence that extends my life by 100 years. What's going to happen at the end of that 100 years? I'm going to die.
You're right.
And so I'm going to meet my maker. I'm going to enter into eternity. And if all I was concerned with was earthly success, I'm going to get to the back of the line. The Bible says, the last shall be first and the first shall be last. Basically, if you've been after your own success your whole life, you're going to be considered the lowest of the low in heaven.
Right.
If you've been humble and served others and followed God's will as best you can and loved well and served other people, you're going to be lifted up. It's an opposite hierarchy that we see in the world. And so the answer, I think, to looking at these high-profile successes and seeing how successful they are in spite of themselves is that it is short-lived. And it is. I mean,
I would agree. I would. It's. I spent a lifetime victimizing people, stealing money, and these days I don't do that. I was on the Lex Friedman show, and I said on that for me, the most important right now in my life, the most important thing for me is to know who I am, and to know who I am and why I do the things I do, but also to help and not hurt. And I'm getting there. I really feel like I'm getting there. The difference is I just don't have that faith yet to cross over on that bridge. And I really, part of me knows, I think it's going to come. I just don't know when, and it's something I struggle with a lot, Tom, a whole lot, and
seek the Lord while he may be found is a verse that sticks out to me. While today is called today, and while we have the chance, because things can go bad pretty quickly, worse than they are, or God forbid, we could pass away ourselves, right? I mean, I think we're the same age. I'm 54, and my mortality is in front of me all the time.
Right.
At this age, in my gray hair, in my losing my hair.
At least you've got hair.
And my sleep issues. So if you or anybody listening to this want to believe and you can't, it's like, okay, God hears all prayers. Ask him to take you the rest of the way. Lord, give me the faith that I need to fully believe in you. That's a very simple prayer that God would love to answer. And I would just challenge you or anybody.
I'll take that challenge. I will. I'll take that. I don't know what else to say, Tom. I don't. I mean, I've asked you about the leadership. Now, let me ask you this. Do you think that, I look at today's society, and, you were talking, we mentioned the humility, the ego. I see today's society as a society of individuals who largely only think of themselves and not their fellow human beings. Do you think that we're ever going to get past that and back to that? Because I look at parts of our history where we have been looking out for each other, where we've been taking care of our fellow human beings. And I just don't see that these days. And do you think that we get back to that point where we can, as a whole, do that?
An ideal dream and vision. But I think the reality hits us in the face when we, if we think that back in history we were better, all we have to do is look at Rome.
Well, that's true.
It had some of the things going on in our culture right now were even more so in Rome. They were greedy, over-sexualized. All the gender things going on in our culture were happening there.
Right.
Everything that we're dealing with in our culture was on steroids back then, a couple thousand years ago. And I think, if we think back to like the 1950s in the United States, Beaver Cleaver, or even my own childhood, your own child, I was allowed to walk to school.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I rode my bike.
We didn't have to worry about stuff then. Right.
Yeah. I rode my bike in the neighborhood. And, my mom would ring a bell. She didn't know where I was, but that's when dinner was ready,
Right.
And so, it's tempting to think that we were a better people once because of those memories and that point in history, but then we keep going back, we see human nature hasn't changed.
Right.
But when a country is so self-focused and allows every single vice or every single belief to have equal platform prominence, we just look to Rome to see what happens.
It's true. It's very true.
So that's kind of where we are as a country, I believe.
Well, and I can't disagree with that. I really can't. I'm the guy that, in my presentations, a lot of times I say that all things tend toward chaos, that all things fall apart. And
all roads lead to Rome.
That's it. That's
your new one.
Today, that's it. Tom Harper, if someone wanted to reach out and get the book, where do they find it?
It's on Amazon, titled Servant Leader Strong. That's the easiest way to get it. You can also feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Just look for Tom Harper, and there it is on the screen for you, and we'd love to connect. I do a lot in the business world. I do a lot in the church world, and my two worlds overlap. So I have a lot of contacts on both sides, and it's just where God has me. And I loved meeting you, get to know you, Brett, and I hope that we can continue this relationship into the future.
No, I know we absolutely will. And Tom, I can't thank you enough for not only coming on the show and talking about this, but taking the time to care. It's something that we need more of as a whole in this world. And man, I honestly cannot thank you enough. Truly, I hope you're doing all right, dude.
Well, thank you, man. It's been a pleasure. It's been a real joy to be on the show with you and to get to know you a little bit.
Yes, and I told my wife Michele about you before I came in, and she said to make sure that I told you that her thoughts and prayers were with you.
Oh, thank you.
Yes,
tell her thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Thank you again so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
All right. You got it. Thank you.
That was Tom Harper, author of Servant Leader Strong. By all means, head over to Amazon, look at the book, get the book. The thing is that, as Tom mentioned, you do not have to believe in the Bible in order to get lessons from the Bible. I am well read in many different theological texts. I'm a firm believer in those lessons helping to shape one's moral compass and the understanding of right and wrong. But it goes further than that. As Tom points out in this interview, you've got Proverbs, you've got these leadership principles that take place in this book. It's well worth reading and learning from the text, regardless of whether you believe it. Now, we know that, as I said, I've got huge faith problems, and I'm trying to come to terms with those. But again, pick up this book, Servant Leader Strong. I think it's a very good book. Tom does an outstanding job in detailing the different leadership principles throughout the Bible. There are several different personalities, characters, whatever you call it, people in the Bible that one can emulate and try to strive toward those types of leadership principles. My name is Brett Johnson. This is the Brett Johnson Show. We're going to close things out. And I think we're going to close things out the way we usually close them out. Stay safe out there. Stay secure. Stay vigilant. At the end of the day, understand this is the Brett Johnson Show. The most important thing, just do the right damn thing. I'm Brett Johnson. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. Until next time.